The auditorium pulsed with energy. Laughter echoed off the polished walls. Camera flashes sparked like fireworks, and the faint scent of fresh flowers drifted from the stage decor. Parents sat in clusters, whispering proudly about their children's achievements, while teachers in neatly pressed outfits busied themselves organizing trophies and certificates. At the very back, almost hidden behind a pillar near the exit doors, stood a man in a faded grey uniform. His name tag was smudged, his hands calloused, and in his grip was a crumpled white envelope, now slightly damp from the sweat of anticipation. Mr. Alton Parker, the school janitor, watched silently, eyes trained on the stage, but his thoughts were somewhere else. On the far left row, separated from the groups of chattering students, sat a boy hunched forward with his hands between his knees. His uniform shirt had a slight tear near the collar, and his sneakers were frayed at the edges. Micah Parker, 13 years old, stared down at the polished floor. The excitement around him didn't touch him. It never did. From behind, two boys in matching blazers snickered. "Bet he's only here to clean up after us," one said just loud enough for Micah to hear. Another voice chimed in from the girls' row. "Isn't that the janitor's son? Why even bother showing up?" The laughter was muffled, almost polite, like they had practiced how to mock someone without drawing adult attention. Micah didn't flinch. He was used to being invisible until it was time to be laughed at. "Now," the principal's voice rang through the speakers, "we come to the final and most prestigious award of the year, Student of the Year. This award goes to a student who has shown outstanding academic performance, leadership, and resilience." The auditorium quieted. Parents leaned forward. Students held their breath, some already half rising in their seats, anticipating their names. The principal glanced at the paper, then hesitated. He cleared his throat. "This year's Student of the Year is Micah Parker." Silence. Not a clap, not a sound. Then, gasps. A whisper somewhere in the middle row, sharp and stunned. "The cleaner's son." All heads turned. Micah didn't move at first. His mouth parted slightly, eyes blinking like he was trying to make sense of the moment. His classmates stared, some with confusion, others with discomfort, a few with open irritation. From the back of the hall, Alton Parker straightened slowly. The envelope in his hand trembled. His son, the boy they ignored, ridiculed, overlooked, was being called forward, not for detention, not as a mistake, but as the best student in the entire school. The lights from the stage cast a soft glow on Micah's stunned face as the camera froze on him. That single second hung heavy in the air. Not one person in that room knew what he had fought through to reach this moment. Not yet. The apartment behind the school compound was barely the size of a classroom storage closet. One room, one bed, a makeshift curtain dividing the sleeping area from the small kitchenette. A single fan spun slowly overhead, squeaking every few seconds. That was home for Micah Parker and his father, Alton. Alton hadn't always been a janitor. Once, he was on track to becoming an engineer, second year at a prestigious university, top of his class. But life doesn't ask for permission before it takes. When his wife, Naomi, fell sick suddenly and passed within 6 months, everything crumbled. Alton dropped out to raise their infant son. He took the first job he could find, cleaning floors, scrubbing toilets, fixing leaking pipes. Micah had grown up surrounded by books and broken tools, his father's two surviving passions. They couldn't afford a TV, but they had a second-hand laptop and a stack of science textbooks Alton salvaged from donation bins. Every night, after his father returned home smelling of bleach and metal, they'd sit by the window, solving math problems and reading aloud from science journals. But once Micah stepped outside that apartment and into the school corridors, none of that brilliance mattered. To the other kids, he was mop boy, trash kid, stain, the son of the man who mopped up their mess after lunch. Kyle Ramsey once threw a burger wrapper at his feet and said, "Practice for your future." Brittany Langley, daughter of the PTA president, used to plug her nose dramatically whenever he walked by. Logan, whose father ran a tech firm and donated tablets to the school, tripped Micah in the hallway so often it became routine. The teachers didn't stop it. They didn't encourage it either. They just didn't see Micah at all. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't carry a last name that opened doors. So when he scored perfect marks in science or submitted stories that made the substitute teacher cry once, the papers were returned without a word. No praise, no awards, just red check marks and silence. At home, Alton tried to stay optimistic. He'd say, "Don't worry about them, son. Just stay focused. Be humble. Prove them wrong in your own time. Micah nodded every time, but it got harder with each school day. His only solace came in the form of Tamia, a girl with soft eyes and quiet shoes. She had a stutter and a nebulizer she carried in her backpack. The other students pretended she didn't exist, which, in middle school terms, was almost better than being ridiculed. Micah and Tamia started sitting together during lunch under the staircase, trading notes and stories. "You write like you're already an author," she told him once, cheeks slightly flushed. "You breathe like you're running marathons," he replied, making her laugh until she coughed and reached for her inhaler. They were invisible to the school, but not to each other. The school itself was a monument to privilege. Marble floors, sponsored murals, banners showcasing alumni who now attended Ivy League schools. Everything catered to the families that wrote the donation checks. Awards were handed to the well-dressed. Applause followed the popular. Micah watched Brittany win the Creative Excellence Award for a short story that Tamia swore was plagiarized. Logan received the Tech Pioneer Medal for a science project his cousin built. Kyle was once given Most Improved simply for remembering to bring his homework twice in a row. Micah kept his head down. He submitted projects that never got acknowledged. He helped Tamia build a speech reading app for her stutter. It worked, but no teacher ever looked at it. In every hallway, in every classroom, he was still just the janitor's son. Not the boy who rewired the school's broken projector on his lunch break. Not the boy who placed first in an anonymous regional coding competition under a pseudonym. Not the boy who carried Tamia to the nurse's office during her asthma attack when everyone else froze. To the world inside those pristine school walls, he was still nothing more than a name on a faded uniform, and he was tired of it. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual midday chaos. Trays clattered, laughter echoed, and the scent of oily fries hung heavy in the air. Micah walked cautiously with his homemade lunch in hand, a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in foil and an overripe banana. He headed to his usual spot behind the gym where he and Tamia could eat in peace. But Logan was waiting. As Micah passed the vending machine, Logan stuck out his foot. It was deliberate. Micah stumbled forward, landing hard on the tile floor. His lunch splattered across the ground. Gasps and laughter exploded from the tables. Someone yelled, "Clean it up, mop boy!" Micah's face burned, but he didn't say a word. Slowly, he picked up the foil, brushing off pieces of dirt, and straightened his back. Tamia stood nearby, her phone shaking in her hand. She had caught everything on video. Logan's smirk, the taunts, the laughter. Later, as they sat behind the gym, Tamia slid her phone over. "You should post this. People need to see." Micah shook his head. "They'll just twist it. Say I tripped, that I'm looking for pity." Tamia looked down. "They don't deserve you, Micah." That night, in the quiet of their cramped apartment, Micah opened his laptop. He logged into the anonymous National Math Challenge site, something he had done every year since he was 10. But this year felt different. His hands moved with confidence, solving problems that required more than formulas, problems that demanded intuition, creativity, brilliance. He finished just before midnight and closed his laptop without a word. 3 weeks passed. He'd almost forgotten about it. Then came the email. "Micah Parker, you are among the top 10 scorers in the United States. A representative from the National Math Initiative would like to visit your school to verify your identity and present you with a recognition certificate." Alton was speechless. "Micah, do you know what this means?" Micah just stared at the screen, unsure if he was dreaming. The next day, Alton brought the news to the principal's office, full of pride. He even wore his old college shirt, the one he hadn't dared to touch in years. But the response wasn't what he expected. Vice Principal Meadows frowned as she read the email. "This kind of publicity may not reflect positively on our image. A janitor's son representing us on a national platform." Principal Duval glanced over her glasses. "Maybe we redirect the visit. Perhaps Logan can represent the school. He won the science fair last year, didn't he?" "Micah took that video," Alton said, his voice low. "Logan didn't even make his own project." Meadows waved a hand. "Let's not dwell on details. Optics matter. We can't afford to become a charity case in front of the board." Unnoticed behind the door, Micah had heard every word. He stood there frozen, his triumph shrinking into shame. Back home, he sat on the bed, silent. His laptop stayed shut, the certificate email unread. Alton came in, wiping sweat from his brow, and saw the look in his son's eyes. the look of someone who was used to being erased. He sat beside him. "You heard them, didn't you?" Micah didn't answer. Alton reached into the drawer and pulled out a photograph, a younger version of himself in a lab coat, standing beside Naomi. "I used to think people like them had the power to define us," he said softly. "That if they didn't clap, our victories didn't count. But I was wrong." He turned to Micah. "Let them fear your light. You don't need their permission to shine." Micah looked at his father, and for the first time in days, something in him stirred. Not anger, not pain, but resolve. Micah sat hunched at the dinner table, which doubled as a desk, surrounded by stacks of handwritten notes, scavenged circuit boards, and an old tablet with a cracked screen. His fingers trembled slightly as he compiled his full submission for the National Math and Innovation Award. It wasn't just numbers and formulas anymore. It was his life. He included pictures of his solar-powered fan made from soda cans and broken phone parts, a short story he'd written that won an underground youth contest, and code from a mobile budgeting app he created for low-income families. It was raw, it was genius, and it was entirely his. 3 days later, his submission was picked up by a small academic blog known for highlighting underdog prodigies. The post was titled, "The Janitor's Son Who Coded His Way into the National Spotlight." Within hours, comments flooded in, shares skyrocketed. Professors, engineers, and education activists began reposting Micah's work with captions like, "This is the future," and "Merit over money." But back at school, the buzz wasn't welcome. Brittany's mom, Cassandra Wallace, stormed into the PTA meeting, her voice sharp. "This is not the narrative we want. If this school becomes a charity case, it will reflect poorly on the families that built it." Principal Duval nodded calmly. "We're managing it. We've already tightened controls around student records." The next week, Micah was called into the office. "We noticed some inconsistencies with your grades," said Vice Principal Meadows, her voice measured but cold. "We'll need to review your academic file. In the meantime, you may not be eligible for any further honors." Micah's chest tightened. That night, he and Tamia went to check the school's online student portal. His straight A's were gone, replaced with C's and D's. His entire academic record had been altered. "I don't get it," Micah whispered. "They erased me." Tamia stared at the screen. "No, they didn't. They just buried you." Tamia's older brother, Isaiah, was a cybersecurity major who lived nearby. When she told him what happened, he came over that night with his laptop. "They're dumb," Isaiah said, typing quickly. "They didn't even wipe the backup logs." Within an hour, Isaiah had accessed archived data buried deep in the school's servers. Not only did he find Micah's real records, flawless transcripts, competition scores, teacher notes, but he discovered something else, a pattern, dozens of similar cases, all targeting students from poor families. "This isn't just sabotage," Isaiah muttered. "It's systemic fraud." Micah copied everything onto a flash drive and emailed it to Dawn Taylor, a young, relentless journalist known for taking on institutions no one else would. She replied an hour later, "Meet me tomorrow. This isn't just a story, it's a firestorm." By the end of the week, the school knew someone had leaked information. The principal was furious. Looking for a scapegoat, they turned to the one person who couldn't defend himself, Alton. "He was seen taking cleaning supplies off school property," Meadows announced. "Effective immediately. Mr. Parker is suspended pending investigation." Alton's shoulders slumped as he packed up his cart. No trial, no hearing, just whispers and locked doors. Micah watched in disbelief. "You didn't do anything." "I know," Alton said quietly, placing his mop into the bucket. "But truth isn't scared of time. Let them throw mud. It's the only thing they have." Micah's fists clenched. "They want me to disappear." "No, son. They want your silence," Alton replied. "Don't fight the fire with fear. Fight it with truth." But things kept spiraling. A few days later, during gym class, Tamia collapsed during a sprint. Her inhaler had been left in her bag, which the coach wouldn't allow her to keep nearby, despite her doctor's note. Micah rode in the ambulance with her, shaking with rage. "They ignored her," he whispered. "They knew she could get sick." That night, Micah opened a blank document. He didn't sign his name. He wrote as a student, a witness, and a survivor. The exposé was raw and blistering. It detailed how poor students were humiliated, how records were tampered with, how teachers looked the other way. He included what happened to Tamia and how the coach ignored medical documentation. He attached screenshots, quotes, timelines. The article went live on an anonymous student justice blog. By morning, it had been picked up by 3 education watchdog pages. The headline read, "Inside one school's war on its own students." Parents began calling the school. Reporters showed up at the gates. Alumni demanded answers. Micah walked into class the next day, head held high for the first time. The whispers were different now. Not mop boy. Now it was, "That's the kid from the article." Change had started, and it wasn't waiting for permission. The sun poured through the tall auditorium windows as parents, students, teachers, and reporters filled the seats. Result day had never seen this much attention. Banners fluttered. A small red carpet led up to the stage. For once, the media cameras weren't here for the principal or the PTA president. They were here for Micah Parker. Alton stood quietly near the back wall, still in his faded uniform, freshly washed and pressed. He held nothing but a folded handkerchief and pride swelling in his chest. Tamia sat in the front row beside her brother, her inhaler close, her expression steady. Principal Hadley approached the microphone first, flanked by board members in polished suits. His smile was stiff. "Today," he began, "we celebrate academic excellence and inclusive education. Our school remains a shining example of nurturing talent from all walks of life." Alton raised an eyebrow. Hadley continued with general platitudes, naming sponsors and donors, offering polished praise for resilience and potential. But he never once mentioned Micah's name directly, until the National Award Committee representative finally stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. "And now," she said, "we proudly present this year's National Math and Innovation Award to one of the top 10 young minds in the country, Micah Parker." A ripple spread across the auditorium. Micah stood, buttoned his faded shirt, and walked up to the stage. He moved slowly, eyes meeting those who used to mock him. The whispers started again, but this time they carried awe. He took the mic. "Thank you," he began. "This award isn't just about math or science. It's about being seen." He looked over at Alton. "My dad cleaned these hallways so I could dream in them. He gave up everything so I could stand here. And for most of my life, people like him, and like me, were invisible in this building." He paused, then turned to the rows of teachers and PTA parents. "I was called trash boy, mop kid. I was ignored. I was told silently and loudly that I didn't belong here, that no matter how hard I worked, my place would always be in the background." A murmur rippled. "But I'm not here for revenge," Micah said. "I'm here because there are dozens of kids like me, kids who are brilliant, kind, and overlooked. Because they don't wear designer clothes or sit in the front of fancy cars after school." He took a breath, then continued, firmer now. "I submitted evidence of grade manipulation and neglect. I gave it to a journalist. It's all real. I have the logs, and I have the names." Gasps echoed across the room. "And today, I'm saying their names, not to shame them, but to show what silence protects. Vice Principal Meadows, who altered record, Coach Dana, who ignored Tamia's medical need, Brittany Wallace, Kyle Benson, Logan Daniels, who bullied me relentlessly while staff looked the other way." The crowd tensed. Principal Hadley stood frozen. Dawn Taylor stepped forward from the aisle, raising her phone. "We're live," she whispered. "Keep going." Micah nodded. "But this story isn't just mine. Tamia stood beside me when no one else did, and she brought something with her today." Tamia stood slowly. Her hand trembled only slightly as she walked to the stage, handed Micah a small USB stick. He plugged it into the projector port on the podium laptop. The screen behind him flickered, and then played. The footage was grainy but clear. Logan tripping Micah, Brittany sneering, "Get back to your mop, Janitor Jr." Kyle throwing Micah's books into the trash. The entire auditorium went silent. Then came the sounds of laughter in the video, students egging them on. But in the crowd now, no one laughed. A father stood, jaw tight, recognizing his own son on screen. He walked out, dragging his boy behind him. Micah looked back to the crowd, his voice even. "All I ever wanted," he said, "was to be treated like I mattered. You taught me I didn't, until I proved I did." For a moment there was silence. Then Tamia clapped, then Alton, then the crowd, rising to their feet, roared in applause. Micah didn't smile. He just stood there, steady, as the sound washed over him. And in the corner, Red-faced staff members avoided each other's eyes, the ones who stayed silent too long. A week after the assembly, everything began to shift. The story had gone national. Micah's speech and the bullying footage trended online. News anchors called him a voice for the unheard, and education bloggers praised his courage. But Micah didn't care for the noise. What mattered to him was the quiet that followed, the kind that came with change. The email came on a Wednesday evening. An elite STEM academy, renowned for its diversity outreach and innovation programs, had watched his speech. They offered Micah a full scholarship, room and board, mentorship, and a stipend. "Your vision and values are what the future needs," the director wrote. Alton sat on their apartment stoop, reading the letter over and over. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he placed a hand on Micah's shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just walk through the fire, son. You lit the way." The following Monday, the school board launched a formal inquiry. Within days, Vice Principal Meadows quietly resigned. Teachers tied to the altered grades were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. An independent review committee was formed, and a sweeping new equity policy was introduced. Micah's academic record was restored. His real grades, straight A's with advanced credits, were now visible to everyone. The gym coach who ignored Tamia's medical warning was terminated. In her place came someone new, a coach who actually read student files and cared about more than just performance. Tamia finally received proper accommodations and was given a seat on the newly formed Student Wellness Council. The halls of the school, once ruled by legacy and wealth, began to breathe differently. Students who had once stayed silent, poor kids, quiet ones, the ones who knew they'd never be picked for awards, started speaking up. A few teachers stepped up too, ashamed they hadn't done more. They created after-school clubs focused on mentoring and fairness. Micah's courage had cracked something open. Alton's name was cleared. The investigation found no evidence of theft, just a targeted suspension meant to distract and punish. The district not only reinstated him, but promoted him to facilities supervisor. He now managed a team and even trained new hires. The janitor was now the boss. Micah kept his head down through it all. He still wore the same old sneakers, still helped Tamia with her lunch tray. But now, he was invited to speak at assemblies, other schools, even youth leadership panels across the state. He never changed his message. "It's not about where you come from," he told one auditorium full of students. "It's about what you do when no one believes in you, because you might be the one who changes everything." Tamia walked beside him one afternoon after school, watching as younger kids smiled at Micah like he was a legend. She shook her head, half teasing. "You're famous now." Micah shrugged. "I didn't fight to be famous," he said. "I fought because no one else would." And he meant it. Micah never asked to be the symbol of anything. He just wanted to be seen, to be treated fairly, to live with his head high, without shame. In doing so, he became something bigger than he imagined. A reminder that the truth, even when whispered by the quietest voice, could shake a whole building. The gates of the foundation creaked open gently, and Evelyn stepped through, her cane tapping softly against the paved walkway. The sun cast a golden sheen on the newly painted buildings, where bright murals of girls reading, drawing and dreaming stretched across the walls. Laughter echoed from the courtyard, high, light, free. She paused at the entrance, her gaze resting on a brass plaque mounted on the outer wall. She leaned in, her hand brushing the cool metal. "In honor of Evelyn Blake, the woman who taught one child and unknowingly healed a generation." Her breath caught. Behind her, a young teacher was guiding girls into class. Some waved at her shyly, others too lost in excitement to notice. One girl, about 8, turned mid-run and beamed at Evelyn with the same wide-eyed curiosity Celia once had. Evelyn smiled back, her eyes brimming but steady. Celia appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. But today she was not a doctor, just a daughter in spirit. She placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "They all know your name," Celia said softly. "But one day, they'll know your story too." Evelyn looked out at the classrooms, at the chalkboards and mismatched desks, at the girls who ran barefoot without shame, who laughed with no fear of silence, and in that moment, the ache that had lingered in her heart for decades, the regret, the loss, the wondering, began to ease. A voice within her, perhaps a memory, perhaps something deeper, spoke quietly. "I thought I had lost everything, but in teaching one forgotten girl to read, I unknowingly wrote my life's most powerful story. She didn't need applause. She didn't need to be understood by the ones who had walked away. These girls, this space, this peace was enough. She took a seat under the old almond tree and watched as the next class began, their voices rising like a hymn. And there, surrounded by the very hope she once planted, Evelyn Blake finally rested, not in silence, but in quiet joy. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.